Good afternoon, Who Dat Nation. Brendan Boylan here with my buddy, my friend Bob Rose. It's the Bayou Blitz postgame show. The Saints made it interesting, but the comeback falls short. They lose to the Lions 33-28. Bob, it was a first quarter from hell, one that a lot of us here in the media had not seen from New Orleans in a long time. I mean, for all of you people that are massive parts of Saints Twitter, I know a lot of you are. You saw some of the responses, not just from fans but media alike, saying this is something they hadn't seen. Maybe the worst start to a Saints game in 8, 9, 10 years. People were trying to recount the last time that it had been that bad, and things seemed to go from bad to worse there in the first quarter. The Superdome was full of blue. You had people taking live videos of the Superdome saying, you would think we're in Detroit right now. And we'll start there, Bob. Bob, let's start with that first quarter. Hopefully your mental state, at least for this and for your articles moving forward, are much better than they were about 1:15, 1:20 in the afternoon Eastern time. But Bob, what a horrific start for the Saints, going down 21-0 the first 7 minutes of the ball game.
Yeah, I mean, it was beyond effing embarrassing. As bad as we've seen the Saints during the Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael, and this year Derek Carr era, this was as bad as they have been ever. Since I'd have to recall the Mike Ditka era, for Saints football that bad. Hey, I'll give all the credit in the world to the team, to the coaches. I really thought, I forget which one of our fans predicted a 40-3 score. It sure as heck looked like that it was going to be something like that. And I started envisioning scenarios, maybe wishful thinking, I don't know, envisioning scenarios in my head where a post-game press conference, Dennis Allen doesn't even come out for it. Mickey Loomis comes out and announces that they made a coaching change. That was where my mentality was. So all the credit in the world to the Saints for bouncing back the way they did. And they vastly outplayed the Detroit Lions through the final three quarters. They seem to be firing on most cylinders on offense. But as bad teams will do, they turned the ball twice, deep in their own territory. They couldn't make the plays down the stretch of the game when it mattered most. Now, that's albeit with a backup quarterback, but still. And then defensively, you couldn't get Jared Goff on the ground on a third and long when you could have gotten the ball back for your offense with a good bit of time remaining. I've said it many times in the last 6 or 8 weeks. This is what bad football teams do. And make no mistake, the Saints are a bad football team. Watching the end of the New York Jets-Atlanta Falcons game when the Jets had to go 93 yards with Trevor Siemian at quarterback. You had to put a touchdown on the board to beat the Falcons. Yes, I was obviously rooting for the Jets to somehow, some way pull it off. In a game of two miserable teams, but it almost felt like a welcome relief. When the Falcons predictably stopped the Jets. The Saints are by no means mathematically out of it, but from here on out they need help. The dreaded win out and need help scenario. But back to this game. I love the fight that the Saints showed over the last 3 quarters. But again, as we've seen throughout the now 29 game era of Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael, and 12 games with Derek Carr, the Saints just do what bad football teams do.
So what you said there at the beginning, thinking of scenarios there about 7 minutes into the game where you're like, does Dennis Allen even make it out of the building? Like, I thought it was going to get that bad. I really did.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, all credit in the world for them to fight back. Defense wasn't perfect by any means. Obviously, didn't make plays down the stretch, but they did enough in the second and third quarter to keep the Saints in the ball game. Offense had opportunities. Offense converted in the red zone today.
Yeah,
that was a big deal. I think they ended up saying it on the broadcast, but interestingly enough, every Saints scoring drive had a Olave reception of over like 15 or 20 yards. So Olave was a big part of the game, and they didn't even know if he was going to play today. So they got production out of different places. Taysom Hill was Taysom Hill, right? Taysom ended up finishing with, there you go, 74 scrimmage yards and a touchdown. Kamara went over 100 scrimmage yards. But I want to go back to the first quarter and kind of get the negative out of the way for this show. There's plenty of it, but the biggest negatives. And if you guys follow me on Twitter, I don't personally tweet a lot. It's a lot of retweeting and things like that. So when I actually send a tweet out, it's a little bit meaningful. And I sent a tweet out after the Boo Birds for Derek Carr started. And I said, essentially, that's all you need to know and see to know the state of the Saints right now. And even after this game, I think that still holds true, and that's going to be a different conversation for a different day as we go into the week with the Bayou Blitz podcast on whatever day we pick this week, because it just is what it is.
Well, it clearly can't be Wednesday by what you were hinting at earlier. I can't do Friday, so I guess we either do Thursday or a special Saturday night broadcast. I don't know.
Thursday it is. We'll figure it out. But that whole topic of where the state of the Saints are. But had you ever seen something like that? And all the time that we've been around this team, we've covered this team, I've covered sports from high school, collegiate, NFL. I had never seen something like that where, and given the quarterbacks don't flip-flop plays very often at any level, but I had never seen a situation where it was every time Taysom Hill came out onto the field to play quarterback, eruption of cheers. And then as soon as Derek Carr steps on the field, the Boo Birds come out. Bob, what was your initial reaction to that? And have you ever seen something like that before?
I've not seen anything like it to my recollection, but my reaction to it was laughter. Because at this point you can do nothing. I'm doing nothing but point at this team and laugh because I consider them a joke. But it was really the only sign of life that the Saints crowd had shown, until about midway into the third quarter. They finally got back into it in a way that you would expect the dome crowd to. But it's clear that this entire fan base is soured on Derek Carr. And I'll say it again, it's not like Derek Carr is solely responsible for this team's woes. In fact, far from it. But I understand the frustration, as we sit here and there's still 5 games to go. I can't see how the team goes into 2024 confidently with Derek Carr as quarterback. The coach's conversation is for another day. But with as sour as this fan base has gotten on this team and on this quarterback, for the fans to turn on the team in a home game like this, when they were dragging themselves back into the game and had a realistic shot at really pulling this off, for them to act like that. Again, I'm not criticizing the fans that were in attendance. Again, I understand it. It's the only way that you can legally show your displeasure. So by all means, boo away. But it was just, as you said, it was just a stark contrast. And it's not like Taysom Hill is the answer to quarterback here, and that we're talking, any kind of legitimate quarterback controversy. It's just how this team, this fan base feels about number 4 and the fact that he's quarterbacking for the New Orleans Saints.
Oh, and frankly, after that first quarter woe, I threw the statistics up, and I'll throw them up again while we're talking about it. 17 of 22 for 226. You get the red zone touchdown to Jimmy Graham, the interception early, the fumble that is going to be credited against Derek Carr. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do when you have a polling lineman knock the ball out of your arms? You could make the argument timing should be there, but at the end of the day, there are way too many things that happen in the trenches that can make your timing off by a hair.
Yeah, and even the interception that you pointed out, That was on Jawan Johnson. Derek Carr will get credit for it, but that was on Jawan Johnson, who, by the way, was targeted 3 times and dropped 2 easy passes. That is 5 drops for Jawan Johnson in the last 2 weeks. People got to realize, again, this is not all Dennis Allen's fault. It's not all Pete Carmichael's fault. It's all Derek Carr's, not all Derek Carr's fault. They all deserve a huge credit of the share of the blame. But it's players like Jawan Johnson muffing easy plays like that. There's no excuse for it. And in a microcosm, that's what's wrong with this team.
I will blame Derek Carr on that interception though, because man, A.T. Perry was wide open. And
Yes.
He had pressure in his face, but if you slide left and just get the ball anywhere around him, there was nobody there.
That's a great point.
Again, easier to say that, not having a 300-pound man in front of me. But nonetheless, A.T. Perry could have got on his knees, hands and knees, and crawled to the end zone. That's how wide open he was. Weird first quarter. Saints come back. Things are seeming to go okay, but it seemed like every time New Orleans got momentum, Detroit answered. Whether it was the Jameson Williams double reverse for a touchdown, Laporta just absolutely murdered the Saints today. That's became a trend with tight ends eating the Saints alive. But everything seemed to get halted momentum-wise again when Carr left the game. The only reports that we have are the same ones that you've seen. I'm sure more will come out, not today, but as the days progress. Make sure you follow Saints News Network, Bob Rose, John Hendricks, Kyle T. Mosley, Ross Jackson. Those guys are going to have your updates probably just as the week progresses. You're not going to hear anything new tonight for the most part, unless it is what we already know. He's in concussion protocol. But concussion, back and shoulder injury, already had the AC sprain on that throwing shoulder. It's now, back-to-back weeks with a concussion. Well, Minnesota and then bye week, Atlanta. So you're getting 2 concussions in the course of a month. We'll see how his status plays out going into next week as well. But that killed some momentum as well. You get the Jameis Winston experience. Jameis got a nice applause from the crowd. But very like it was in Minnesota. You kind of know what you're getting out of Jameis. It's a true gunslinger. The tip pass to Olave. That ball doesn't get tipped, it's probably picked. But Olave able to reel in off the tip drill and get the Saints inside the 5 that ends up with a touchdown. And then just some missed timing between Olave and Jameis on both. I did like Daryl Johnson's explanation of why, at least on the first throw, that Jameis probably threw it where he was because there was all that space to cut up. The second one was on Jameis, and Jameis finishes the game like 2 of 5 for 41 yards. But Bob, so many people, myself in that boat too, saying, well, you have a guy like Jameis there. If Derek Carr struggles, we saw the Jameis Winston experience against Minnesota. We see it again today. Was today enough of a sample size to finally go, hey, this is why the Jameis Winston experience has not surpassed the Derek Carr experience in your eyes?
Every time Jameis Winston steps onto the field is enough of a sample size for us. Even when he puts up numbers and makes plays, it's often, I'm not going to call it luck, but it's often a hair from disaster. Or when there is disaster, it's often a hair from a big play for your offense. It's the roller coaster ride that is Jameis Winston. The 3 completions to end the game, he was just enough off target, that fizzled out the New Orleans drives. You talked about the tip pass to Olave, and I'll go the extra mile, and that's not just an interception. That's probably a pick 6. Jameis Winston is not the answer at this position either. No, I'm not saying that because I believe Derek Carr is the answer. I don't think the quarterbacking answer is on the roster. But I'll tell you, back to your point of, this is Derek Carr's third shoulder injury of the year, his second concussion. It would be absolutely shocking if Derek Carr was behind center next week. So buckle in, folks. We're going to see the Jameis Winston experiment or experience again. Wouldn't surprise me if it's for the next couple of weeks or longer, depending on the nature of Carr's concussion. Can Jameis make plays in this offense? Absolutely, because Jameis Winston can be a playmaker. He's shown that, but he's too wildly inaccurate. And he's too wild with his decision making. For this particular offense to be consistently successful. And that's just, I like Jameis Winston. I root for Jameis Winston. I really do. I mean, the kid seems like a really solid person. It just, I'll say it again. The quarterback answer is not on this roster right now, period.
Looking at the defense, it was another day where couldn't find a pass rush. They had flashes, not of the pass rush, but they had flashes and moments where the defense looked all right. At the end of the day, they still surrender 33 points, given 2 of those short field. If those mistakes don't happen, I mean, every football game's a if, and but. But if those mistakes don't happen, you're looking at a completely different ball game. Particularly the fumble that got knocked out of Carr's hands with the pulling James Hurst. I mean, if that doesn't happen, you're looking at a completely different ball game potentially. Has the defense shown you, or did the defense show you enough to have a little bit more confidence in them, or is this still a defense where you go, you're just mediocre, like you're better than some? You're not, because I remember having this conversation with you really early in the season when the Saints defense was playing really well. And you said something along the lines of, but they're not a top 10 defense. Like the numbers might say they're a top 10 defense, but they're not a top 10 defense. That's obviously shown over the last few weeks. Okay, Bob, I shouldn't have said that. Like I know Lauren's there somewhere. She's got to be. She's sitting here shaking her head in the background. Why are you giving his head, more air, Brendan? Come on.
Did you just call me an airhead?
I mean, a little bit, maybe. I don't know. Lauren may or may not have paid me to say that. That might have been our latest was your wife. But do you think this defense has done enough to show, hey, we can be a team that can do enough over the last little bit of a stretch to give the Saints a pulse in the playoff race, or do you still think this is a mediocre defense?
I think this is a mediocre defense. It's a better than average defense. Probably in the top half of the league, but again, nowhere near top 10, nowhere near top 12. Sam Laporta was targeted 9 times today. Caught all 9 balls, set a Detroit Lions rookie record for receiving yards for a tight end in a game. They're helpless against tight ends. And just like the offensive staff, the defensive staff can do very little, in way of in-game adjustments. You couldn't stop Sam Laporta early on, and nothing changed all game long. The team is still getting blown off of the ball early on. Now they fortified a little bit later against the run, so good for them. You still can't find a pass rush, you still in key moments you let guys, mediocre receivers, run free through your secondary to make big plays in crucial moments. Now I realize in Goodell's NFL, that's what he wants. He doesn't want a defensive dominated game, so I get that. But you still have. Just like with the offense, you're not making the plays when they matter most. You didn't get any turnovers today. You came close a couple of times. Paulson and Debo dropped 1 pick, and then they had, I forget who it was, they had another interception opportunity, in the second half. They clamped down on Detroit, on an explosive Detroit offense pretty well. But again, they're not making the plays that good to great units do.
Found it a little humorous. coming out of the locker room, Pam Oliver reported and spoke about what she talked to Dennis Allen about, and Dennis Allen said we have to make the game-changing plays. And I don't know, any other coach says that, I probably don't think anything of it.
Right.
Since Dennis Allen's the guy that every week comes out and says like, "Oh, we're aware of what we need to do better," and that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, Dennis, great. Like down 21-0 in the first quarter, you just got to make game-changing plays. Like, yeah, that makes sense. And to their credit, they did make some game-changing play, momentum-swinging plays.
Yeah.
But at the end, you dug yourself too big of a hole in the first quarter to come back from. And again, some of those things don't happen. Some of those turnovers don't happen. We might be sitting here talking about a Saints victory over a really good Detroit Lions football team. It's hard to ask this question, and as much as people may dislike Derek Carr, it's hard to ask this question because Derek Carr's situation and injury, and moving forward, we really don't know if he's going to play next week and when he will return. We don't know those things. Do you think the Saints did enough today? Nobody likes moral victories, Bob. I know you're Hall of Fame head coaching career. It's probably one of your least favorite things was moral victories. But do you think the Saints offense can take any momentum from this game moving forward? Now, the schedule isn't a cakewalk because at this point, there's no cakewalk for a team that's 2 games below 500. However, the schedule does get a little easier with New York, Carolina, 2 teams that have struggled more than the Saints at times this year. Do you think the offense can carry some of that momentum from this week, even being maybe a Jameis Winston experience next week?
I don't, because you're probably going in with a different quarterback or a different plan at quarterback. It's not, as you probably realize yourself, it's not going to be just Jameis Winston, assuming Carr is sidelined. It's not going to be just Jameis. It's going to be an alternate version of a mutated version of Jameis and Taysom. Jason, Tamus, however you want to call it. We'll come up with better phrases during the course of the week.
Taysom's good. I like
yeah. So you weren't able to run the ball with much consistency. You still have what you have at receiver. I tell you, there's some individual performances that you can hang your hat on. Taysom, Alvin Kamara. I thought Chris Olave had a hell of an afternoon. Especially since he wasn't right. Upstairs after last week's bell ringing. Individual performances. I thought the offensive line, while they didn't get much ground in the running game, they pass protected very, very well. Both quarterback sacks, in my opinion, especially the second one, was just a product of Carr holding onto the ball too long. Protection held up, receivers didn't get separation, quarterback held onto the ball too long. So again, there's individual performances that you can hang your hat on. The red zone, it looked like this team, and we talked about it in our pregame show, it looked like this team has finally settled into an identity of sorts when they get in scoring position against the opposition. But I wouldn't consider it a moral victory. And again, you didn't do enough plays even on offense, to really take control of the game at any point in time.
Yeah, you were playing catch up the whole game. That's something we talked about in the pregame, is feeling like this was a game where the Saints could and end up getting behind and having to play catch up. And though the momentum swung, it was never a point where the Saints had this game in their grasp. Let's close it out here for the post-game show. I'll throw some of those stats back up at you guys. Kamara had 109 scrimmage yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. He is now the Saints' all-time leader in rushing touchdowns, passing Mark Ingram today. Taysom Hill had 74 scrimmage yards and a touchdown. Taysom did miss on one long pass. That was the one knock on Taysom today, is he underthrew Olave, which should have been a touchdown. But outside of that, Taysom Hill, game changer, right? And that's just what he is at this point. Is he's a guy you can plug and play just about anywhere. He's going to influence the game positively. He does that again today. Derek Carr's numbers before going down with the injury, 17 of 22 for 226, a touchdown and interception. Jameis's relief duty, 2 for 5 for 41 yards. And then Chris Olave, with what Bob said, a very strong performance for him, 5 catches for 119. Did not get into the end zone today. And then for those of you who just want me to mention it, Jimmy Graham, 1 catch for a touchdown. He's got 2 receptions this year, both going for touchdowns. Who would have thought 6-7 target in the red zone could solve some of your red zone issues, right? We have not been talking about that. Not just us, like not everybody in the Saints media has been talking about that for weeks now. But, who are we? Who are we? Bob, I know you got some work coming out this week. But before we talk about your work, I'll ask you this. At 4:51 p.m. On Sunday, December 3rd, after a 13 loss, do you still have any faith the Saints can win the NFC South, given Atlanta won today?
No, I don't, because you're literally 2 games back of Atlanta in the win column. I gotta believe Tampa Bay is going to beat a defunct Carolina Panthers team today, which means you've now slipped to 3rd place in the NFC South. You've lost to Tampa Bay. You've lost to Atlanta. Atlanta is undefeated in the division, so even if you even up the head-to-head series with a victory in the season finale against the Falcons, you're still, again, there's that whole refrain. You still need some help. You cannot finish tied with the Atlanta Falcons in the division standings because they take the second tiebreaker, even if you split the season series with them. So, again, mathematically, definitely not out of it. Frankly, they're not out of the final wild card spot either. But as we said in the pregame, look at the product on the field. Look at this team not finishing plays, not finishing drives, just not finishing games. No, I don't have any faith that the Saints are going to turn this thing around and win the NFC South whatsoever.
I don't have any faith they're going to turn it around. I have faith they could.
Sure.
I'm hitting you guys with the why is it slipping my mind? Dumb and Dumber. So you're telling me there's a chance. I'm hitting you guys with that, not because I think the Saints are good enough to do it, but because I think the NFC South is such a Twilight Zone-y division that some of these teams could go on losing streaks. And the Saints could find themselves just being the biggest loser or the winningest loser. I don't know how to say that. The winningest loser and being gifted that. Like, I could definitely see a situation where all the teams are under 500. The Saints go into Atlanta the final week of the season. The Saints host the final week of the season at home against Atlanta. And it is one of the old NFC least scenarios where it comes down to the last week of the season, and whoever wins the division. Because we had that a couple years, right, with like the Eagles and Giants in the NFC East, where it came down to like the last week of the season. Neither team was good, and it was just like you are the biggest loser. Congratulations, you host a playoff game. I can see that scenario. But a lot of it also depends on, can the Saints beat bad teams the next 2 weeks? I mean, there are bad teams too, but can they beat a worse team in New York, and can they beat an even worse team in Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, I chuckled a little bit earlier when you said, the Saints are might be happy to get some of these, losing teams on upcoming on their schedule. Carolina and New York might be saying the same thing. Oh, thank God we have the New Orleans Saints coming up.
That's true. That is true. For Carolina, though, I think at this point for the Panthers, and especially living here and listening to local radio over the last week and a half, I think they're just ready for it to be over. Like they're sitting here like, I don't know. And then the whole, can they bench Bryce Young at this point? Like, not because of performance, but because you don't want the guy to get massacred here at the end. Can you bench him at this point? There's just a whole lot going on. Carolina's a dumpster fire. So let's just be happy we're not Carolina. With bad ownership and firing coaches after 11 games and that kind of thing. You guys might be hoping the coach got fired after games, but I digress. Bob, where can everybody read your work for this week as you discuss this game? I'm sure you're going to be talking about playoff scenarios. I'm sure you're going to be talking about Derek Carr, Jameis Winston, whoever's playing quarterback, and how that changes the outlook of the Saints offense moving forward, whether it be a temporary or, if the Saints end up getting the news that Derek's out for the rest of the season. I mean, we don't know. I'm sure you're going to have some articles about that and how that changes the look and feel of this team. Where can people find all that work?
Yeah, folks, and thank you for tuning in, not only to our pregame show, but the Bayou Blitz postgame show as well. Make sure you give all of us a follow at the Bayou Blitz on the Bayou Blitz Facebook page and the Bayou Blitz Twitter page at Bayou Blitz Pod. Give all of us a follow at the Saints News Network as well, at Saints News on Twitter, Saints News Network on Facebook. I can be followed personally, Facebook, Bob Rose, Twitter at Bobby R2613. I'm hard to miss. And, like Brendan said, all of us are going to do our best to give you, I'm not going to say positive coverage. I'm going to say realistic coverage for your New Orleans Saints, not only this upcoming week, but well beyond.
For myself, you can follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. This is going to sound weird to say. I'm not super hopeful after the loss. Like Bob said, I think there's some positives you can take from individual performances. But if the first quarter showed you anything today, guys, and it's a loss, right? But the first quarter showed me, for the first time this season, outside of Twitter, podcasts, the media side of the world, the first quarter showed me how unhappy you guys really are in New Orleans. And I think it's the first time that this team has really experienced that. It's even some of the veterans on this team have probably never experienced what happened in the first quarter. So I have to applaud you guys because at the end of the day, like Bob said, that's the only way. I think you use the word legally.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a stretch, but for the sake of that, that's the only way you guys let people know that you're pissed off and you're angry and you want something to change. Between that and, I know how this works in the NFL. It's not like other sports where you're like, I'm just going to get rid of my season tickets because you may never get them back if you do that.
Right.
But to resell your tickets, not go to games, those are the only ways, on top of booing and what happened in the first quarter, those are the only ways you can get through to people that you're not happy. And you made it very well known, not just in New Orleans, but remember, this was the national game for the 1 o'clock slot. People across the country know how unhappy you guys are. So I'm excited to see if there's a chain reaction here at the end. And what else you guys have in store for us, because that was different. You can use a lot of different words, a lot of big vocabulary. You could pull out the Webster's Dictionary and find words, but that was really different. It was something I have never seen before. So I'm excited for that moving forward. Until Thursday night, Bob and I, we're good for Thursday night.
I think so, yeah.
All right, Thursday night, 9 o'clock, Bayou Blitz. We should have all the information we need for the week on who's starting at quarterback. And any changes that may happen in the front office. Maybe I'm just being hopeful. I don't know. I doubt it at this point. We've said it all year. It's not going to happen during the season. Right. But we will have all the up-to-date coverage for you guys on Thursday. We thank you so much for tuning in with us in the pregame and the postgame. Until Thursday night, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. Keep up with us on Twitter. We'll see you Thursday night. Who dat?